So, hello everybody. My name is Tiffany Angel, and I'm here to give you a little intake on what I perceive the tarot to be. And when I was asked that question, I really had to sit back and think about it because the tarot itself is such a fascinating tool to use to get information, to help people, to assist people. And so I actually came up with it is a universal tool used to assist us through life's journey. And what that means is no matter what, no matter what religious background or belief system that you have, no matter if you're paganism, shamanism, even Christianity, the cards will speak to you in some way or another. What's interesting is when you look at a card, there's so much information in just one picture. There's animals in a picture, or there's facial expressions in a picture, or there's the suit in the picture, and the suits represent specific aspects in our lives. You've got the wands, which are work and career, things you're working on. You've got the cups, which is love, relationships usually, and even close relationships with family members as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be a romantic relationship. And then you have the swords, which is fears and doubts. And then you have the pentacles, which is usually abundance and finances. So 9 times out of 10, when someone comes to get a reading from me, I can already tell you they're going to want to have a reading based on relationships, finances, work and career, or health. Usually those are the 4 reasons why people come in to get a reading. And what's interesting is the tarot is actually laid out to have those, 4 aspects highlighted. There's so many people that I've noticed when they look at the cards, everyone sees something differently. It could be the same exact card. Everyone can look at it, but someone will pick up like a rabbit in the card, or someone will pick up, there's a guy in the background that's looking upset, or look at the mountains, and it could all be in one card. And I think that's what makes tarot such a universal tool, is that everyone can see what they see in the card, and none of them are wrong. That's the thing about the tarot cards. To me, they're like a blueprint, so to speak. Honestly, nowadays, I've read the cards for 10 plus years straight professionally. And nowadays, the cards are really more for the customer than they are for me, because I'll lay them out and I can glance at the whole reading and then basically tune in and channel the information that needs to come through. So when the customer's sitting there, they can look at the cards and they can see the pictures in the cards and they can understand how I got the information that I got. But to me, it really is just kind of like a tool to open me up to channel all the information. And so that's what I'm saying. It doesn't really matter what background you come from, because you'll always notice something that'll speak to you. I think the hardest thing about reading tarot cards for people is confidence. It's not necessarily the cards, and it's not what you're picking up on. It's the confidence to speak what you see. I know a lot of us, me included, in the very beginning, I was like, well, what if I see, this terrible thing, and I don't want to tell somebody if, they're going to lose money, or they're going to lose a house, or something like that. That's the last thing I want to tell. But the thing about the tarot is it's a tool to help someone understand what could be coming in the future. So when you're doing a reading, it's nothing more than a snapshot in time. It's basically at this moment, as things stand, this is what's going to happen. So God gave us free will. Every single one of us can change the aspect of what's going on in our lives. So if you have the tool in front of you and you're able to tell somebody, okay, I see, if you keep going down this path and this is what you keep doing, this is the outcome that could come from that. You could lose your job, or you could be heading toward divorce, or you could be, I don't know, about to have some sort of loss in your life, or even health issues. There are times when I have had customers, I say, you really need to slow down, because a health card will show up that'll tell me that they're not going to be in the greatest bit of health in the next few months. And that is, I kind of feel like a divine intervention coming in to tell somebody, look, you need to slow down. You need to start taking care of yourself. You need to start, drinking more water, or whatever you're picking up on, or, need to, I don't want to say exercise more, but there's things that you need to touch base with your client on what's going on in their life and what aren't they taking care of. So, you would have an open dialect and say, okay, it looks like there's this coming up in the future. Let's talk about that. Let's see, where you are and what you need to work on. And out of having a session, then the person has the knowledge to make change in their life to not have that outcome. So the tarot cards may have like this taboo thing about it where people are like, oh no, they're of the devil, or they're not good, you're not supposed to know the future, but every single person I've ever read for has become a better person for having a session. And I'm not saying I changed them, I just gave them knowledge for them to change the course themselves. And it really truly is remarkable to see the difference of people when they first come to you, all scared and nervous and worried about what's going to show up. And then when they leave, they're happy, relieved, like they just had a weight being taken off their shoulders, because they knew themselves that something wasn't quite right and they weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. But I think, God talks through all of us, and we are put together, or we're put into each other's paths for a reason. So they get a message, I think I'm going to go get a reading today. They walk in, they look at who's available, they pick the person, or they're guided to the person that they feel comfortable with. And then we sit down and we have a session. And 9 times out of 10, things that I am telling the person they need to do, I also need to do. And it's really interesting how that works, because God brings us together to remember and to hear something. And sometimes it's not easy hearing things you need to do, but it's necessary so you can grow and live a happier, more fulfilled life. So I don't know. I just think it's really fascinating when we do sessions to see, the beginning to the end on how people are changed by the information that comes through. And that's what I'm saying. Every single aspect of life is in the tarot cards. So it's really interesting. My advice to you is, if you're going to purchase your tarot deck, it's very important that you resonate with the pictures. There are thousands of different tarot decks out there, and they're all basically the same setup. They're all got the major arcanas, and they've got the 4 suits, or pips is what they call them. So really the thing you need to pay attention to most is the artwork, because the artwork is what speaks to you. The artwork is what you're going to intuitively use to give the information from the cards. So if you do not connect with the artwork, or if you do not resonate with the artwork, then that's probably not the deck for you. And that, going back to when I was saying, no matter what your belief system is, they have so many different kinds of tarot decks from people like they have Native American tarot if you're more into the shamanism. They have Celtic tarot if you're more into like the Nordic, or they even have pagan tarot if you're a pagan. They have every type of art out there. So no matter what you're into, you'll find a deck that'll resonate with you. And one of my biggest keys to learning the tarot too is throw that book away. That book, for years, I had a hard time reading the tarot because of that darn book. I would look at that book, I would do the cards, and I would look in the book and look up what it meant. And I would be so much more confused by that darn book than if I had just looked at the picture and said what I felt. I am one of those people who I didn't feel comfortable doing cards professionally unless I took a class or a course and learned what the cards meant by the book. And you can do that. I would recommend taking a course. I'm one of those people, I just learn when people tell me things, or I learn when I see somebody doing it, and then I can do it. But for some reason, I don't retain the information just by reading it. And I think that was one of my biggest issues in the beginning before I started reading professionally, was that I couldn't remember what the cards meant. And I remember probably about 11 or 12 years ago, a friend of mine was like, you know what the cards mean. I said, no, I don't. She said, yes, you do. And she pulled out the cards, and she pulled out one of the cards, and I believe it was the Nine of Swords. And when she pulled that card out, I was looking at it, and she's like, well, what do you feel? What do you see in the picture? And I was like, well, I see, abandonment, and I feel fear and sadness and like loneliness. And I said, but I kept saying, I don't know. I kept second guessing everything I was saying to her. And she, after I was finished, she said, there was only one thing you were wrong about when it came to that card. And I was like, what's that? She said, the fact that you kept saying, I don't know. And I was like, huh. That's kind of interesting. She goes, that's exactly what the card means. So when I realized that I could learn how to read the cards just by looking at the picture and saying what I felt, I mean, to me, that was pretty remarkable, and sometimes in readings, I'll see something completely different in the card. For some reason, that rabbit will pop out more, or, the dragonfly or butterfly will pop up more than what's actually going on in the image in the card. And that's interesting, because the person I'm sitting next to, it's almost like their guides and angels are telling me, hey, you don't need to pay attention to this, you need to pay attention to that. And so it's really cool, because like I said, there's so much in one card, so much material that you can work with. But don't get overwhelmed trying to understand every single thing in the card. Just pay attention to what pops out at you during a reading. When you first start reading cards too, I think something that's very important to do is to set aside some time and really get to know your cards. Look through them. One of the little exercises I did in the beginning was I would pull a card each day, and I wouldn't look at the card. I would just pull it each day, and I would have it turned upside down. I'd go about my day and do what I needed to do that day. And then at night before I went to bed, I would go and look at the card, and I would see how that card represented the day I had. I wouldn't do it in the morning because I didn't want to set up my day based off a card. I wanted to see how it related to the day I had. And that was a way for me to learn the cards as well, as an individual card, as opposed to a whole spread or a layout. And that, like I said, that really helped me connect with my cards and get to understand them better, more, I guess, on a personal one-on-one level. And one thing about learning the cards textbook style too, I've learned over the years, is that the cards change meaning over time. They don't necessarily stay what the textbook says they are. There's one card in particular that I always think of as the Four of Swords. Okay. Now this card here represents usually hospitalization. It represents somebody who's in ill health, somebody who may have an illness coming up, something along those lines. And when I would do readings with that card, I would ask my customer, my client, I would say, are you doing okay health-wise? Is there anything you need to worry about, or is there anything that's going on? And they would say no. And I'm like, is there anybody who's close to you that could be possibly not doing so well health-wise? And they're like, no, everybody's fine. Everything's great. And then over time, I would ask them, I said, well, what do you do for a living? Because this is the hospitalization card. At least that's what I refer to it as, the hospitalization card. And they would say, oh, well, I'm a nurse and I work in a hospital. And I was like, oh, well, that's probably what it's referring to, because you're around people in the hospital all the time. And now it's interesting, because when that card shows up, my first question to my client is, are you a nurse? And it's really interesting how many people's jaws drop and say, how do you know that? And that's what I think is so cool about the tarot, is that they change meaning to each individual. And so when you're doing a reading and over time you're doing readings, pay attention to the coincidences that are happening, because that is kind of like your guides talking to you in a way that you understand. It's not how someone else wrote in a book. You need to understand it. It's for you. It's a personal journey for you. So it really is cool to sit there and compare notes, basically. And it's done that for quite a few cards for me. They've changed complete meanings. They're not at all what the book says they are. But when I do a reading, I'm dead on, because that was my experience with them. So paying attention to the coincidences is very important, I do believe. And the cards are all about perspective. It's all about how you see things. For instance, there is, I believe it's the Eight of Swords card, and she is bound and tied, and she's got swords all around her. And most people, well, what that card means is somebody who's kind of stuck in a situation, but they don't want to move from that situation. And when that one shows up, I usually tell people, her hands aren't bound, her hands aren't tied. At any point in time, she could take those chains off of her hands. She could take that blindfold off, and she could keep moving in a more positive direction. But see, our ego doesn't like change. So we kind of keep ourselves stuck in a place, because even though we might not be happy there, we're comfortable there because it's what we know. And it's really interesting how many people too are like, wow, I never really thought about that. So when you're reading the cards for somebody and the textbook would say, okay, this is what it means, try to think a little bit beyond what the textbook says it means, because nothing is forever. No one's stuck in a situation forever. Things constantly change and move. That's energy. It's ever flowing. It never ends. And so when you can look at a card that could possibly be a negative card, try to see why the negative is happening, because it's something that can shift them into a more positive experience. I believe some of the biggest lessons we have ever learned in our lifetime have come from negative experiences. If everybody was handed everything and everything was great and jolly, we wouldn't learn a darn thing. So it's kind of like, okay, well, there's a shift coming and there's something you need to do and you need to prepare for. And again, customers or clients, they leave feeling so much better because at least they have an idea, at least they know what's coming, and they're able to be ready for it, so to speak. Well, and to me, that in itself is very helpful, because not knowing, I think, is half the problem or half the battle. Because when you don't know what's coming, it can really blindside you and take you by surprise. But when you have an idea, you can cope and deal with it a little bit better, and have a little bit more tact and understanding when it comes. So that's another reason why I think a lot of people do get card readings. And I usually start my readings by telling people that there's nobody more psychic than you. You know your life better than I do. You know what's going to happen in your life better than I do. All I'm doing is being the vessel to give you the information to tell you what you need to hear. I don't know you from Adam. I have no idea, about your past. I'm going to learn about your future, but I don't know anything about you. So the fact that I'm going to tell you what you need to hear, you already knew it before you walked in the door. You already knew what you needed to hear. But the fact that I don't know you and I'm telling you this, it really does have a profound effect on people, because then they're like, oh, shoot, maybe I really should be listening to what I'm picking up on or the guidance I'm getting. And it really, truly is. And like I said, it's remarkable. The cards are absolutely fascinating to me. I've helped so many people through readings. And that's why I do it. I don't do it for any other reason. I love when I get with a client who I've never met before. I'm not one who wants to know why they want a reading. I'm not one who says, okay, you need to ask me a question. No, because 9 times out of 10, that person walking in the door, they know what they want their reading on, but sometimes spirit has a bigger picture for them, or there's something that they really need to be focusing on that is not what their main focus is. 9 times out of 10, their main focus is not really most important. So when I give a reading, I just say, let's leave it open. Let's just see what spirit has to say. And they're like, okay. And honestly, I do that for the wow factor, because by the time I'm done saying everything I see in the cards and channeling the information and getting the messages and telling them everything, they just sit there like, how did you know that? And I'll say, well, I just said what the card said, and I was just, I guess, tapping in. But and then they would ask me, they would say, I did have questions when I walked in, but you answered every single one of them. And I'll tell them, well, that's usually how it works. The cards will answer your questions before, you need to ask them. And like I said, if you're very interested in reading the cards, I would say go for it. The only thing that's going to stop you is your your fear of not doing it right or whatever. But I guarantee there is no right or wrong way, and that's the thing. If you can go into the tarot going off of what you feel, you will always be on the right path of what the cards mean. Look at the pictures and just say how you feel. And I wish you all the best of luck when it comes to the tarot. And thank you so much for listening to my story. I will talk to y'all later. Bye.